Hello everyone, welcome to Lit Studio by Karishma. So today we are going to talk about postmodernism. We've already discussed about theories like structuralism, post-structuralism and deconstruction, and this video is about postmodernism as a literary theory. Actually, there are movements called modernism and postmodernism. Those are literary movements and literary periods. And in this lecture, it is all about postmodernism as a literary theory. We will also be discussing about modernism and postmodernism as literary periods. Then we will be discussing about literary movements in particular. But let's look at postmodernism as a literary theory in this class. So now, postmodernism developed in the mid 20th century as a rejection of modernist movement. Postmodernism, all the features of it, all the characters of it actually developed as the result of rejection to modernist movement that came before it. The term postmodern was first used in the year 1870. The term was used in the year 1870, but the period is not 1870s. Remember it is almost mid 20th century. That would be around 1940, after 1940. You will know that it is after the Second World War that the period is called postmodern period. It is actually a socio-cultural movement and also a literary theory which shows a shift in perspective, which is also reflected in many streams like science, literature, architecture, communications, technology after the 1950s, that is after the Second World War. So, what is very particular to this particular period would be there is a shift in the perspective. How people looked, how people perceived the world changed during this period. So that is very particular to this postmodern period. So it came in the later half of the 20th century after the Second World War. You have to remember that. And the term for postmodern was first used in the year 1870. Now, one of the key features of postmodern period is consumer capitalism. Consumer capitalism. Capitalism is making like, what is the important feature of capitalism? It draws money from the people that are consuming it, like the consumers, right? They are using the consumers and gaining profits. So capitalism is all about the profits. Media today is extremely influencing how one constructs his or her identity and the world around us. For example, whatever we see in the news, whatever we see in the TV influences us. For example, there is a particular model of phone that's coming, and everybody we see on the TV is using it. Someday or the other, you will have this urge to buy that mobile phone. So that is how media influences us. Now, for example, there are many beauty gurus on YouTube. So when social media is completely filled with them, every now and then a new kind of product is coming onto your feed. Someday or the other, you will be influenced to buy the product. So the media is influencing you to buy it. So you will be the consumer and they will gain profits from your purchase. So that is how media influences the consumer. The content we consume throughout the day, that is TV, newspaper, magazines, movies, etc., is through media. We all know that, right? Postmodernism developed as a response to this surge in consumption, and it revolutionized the old world order. The order which was existing order of the world is changed by the postmodern philosophy, postmodern theory. It came as a response to the consumption. There is a sudden surge in consumption, and postmodern movement came as a response to the surge in the consumption, and it revolutionized the old world order. In modernism, we see that it is an aesthetic movement that developed in the early 20th century and continued till around 1945. It came in the early 20th century and continued till 1945, and it is after 1945 that we see the period of postmodernism, that is after Second World War. Postmodernism can be seen as a continuation and also a breakaway from modernism. This is something very important. There are certain features of modernism that the postmodernist theory continues, but mainly it is rejecting the ideas given in the modernist philosophy. So it's both. It is also a continuation and also a breakaway from the modernist philosophy. Both modernism and postmodernism reject the strict boundaries and high and low art. What modernism and postmodernism have in common is that they both reject the boundaries that exist between high and low art. When people say this is high art and people say this is low art, modernism and postmodernism denies the rigid boundaries between them. They try to blend in and see everything almost equally. They don't see something as a high art and something as a low art. One of the important features of postmodernism is pastiche. It is also one of the key features of modernism as well. So what pastiche means is taking different ideas from previous periods and pasting them together to make a new style. Pastiche simply means you already have your own ingredients, you just combine them and make a new ingredient that is completely new, that is not existing till now. But what you did was you already have the raw materials at hand. The raw materials are not new. You already have them. You just combine them in a way that was not combined previously, and you made out a new product out of it. So that is called pastiche. It is a common feature of both the modernist and postmodernist philosophies. Modernist writers portrayed the world as fragmented and troubled and on the verge of disaster. For example, writers like Albert Camus, Virginia Woolf, and Scott Fitzgerald all have portrayed the world as if it's fragmented and it is very divided. It has no unity. It is missing any kind of coherence. All these writers portrayed the world to be as such. But what the postmodernist writers portrayed the world to be is, they thought of the world as it has underwent numerous disasters already, and now it's beyond any redemption. What modernist philosophers said, that we are on the verge of disaster, we are approaching the disaster, we are on the verge of disaster, so we have to take control now. So there is a hope in the modernist writers. But what the postmodern writers say is that we already underwent all kinds of disasters as of now, and the world is beyond any repair, beyond any redemption. So there is no hope left in the postmodern thinkers. According to modernism, the fragmentation and decenteredness of the world is tragic. The modern writers think that the fragmented or the brokenness of the world is very tragic. As there is no center to anything, there is obviously no meaning to everything. So it is tragic that there is no meaning to anything. It is tragic that the world is broken. That is what modernist thinkers say. But the postmodernist thinkers say that it is not at all tragic. The modernist thinkers say the modern writers are mourning the loss of unity, coherence, and continuity in the world, and hopeful that the world of art can rejuvenate it and thereby add meaning to life. What we've talked about, it is broken and then it is decentered, which means no meaning. So the modernist people are mourning or lamenting at the loss of the unity, coherence, and continuity in the world, and they are hopeful that through their art, if they produce good art, it can rejuvenate the world, it can unite the world, it can bring coherence in the world, and thereby add meaning to life. For example, when we see The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot, he says that the modern world is as infertile as the wasteland. We see his mourning. We see here T.S. Eliot is mourning the loss of the coherence in the world, and he compares the modern world to being very infertile as a wasteland. But the postmodernists are of the view that the fragmentation and incoherence isn't tragic. In fact, It celebrates the fragmentation and decentredness as the only form of existence. The postmodern people say that the brokenness or the decentredness, that is existing without any meaning, is the only form of existence. And they are celebrating this fragmentation and incoherence. You see this idea, they are polar opposites. What postmodern writers are lamenting, that is what modern writers are lamenting, that is what postmodern writers are celebrating. Now we see some comparison between modernism and postmodernism. Modernism began in the 1890s and continued until 1945. Modernism was based on using rational, logical means to gain knowledge. But postmodernism denied the application of logical thinking. So if there is any logical thinking, which means there is centeredness to everything. So what postmodern writers believed is in decentredness. So they don't want any meaning. So they don't want to apply any logical thinking. Modernism was characterized by the hierarchical and organized and determined nature of knowledge. But in postmodernism, there is anarchical, non-totalized and intermediate state of knowledge. The modernist approach was objective, theoretical and analytic. But the postmodernism approach was based on subjectivity. It is based on opinions. Just because I felt it, it is just like that. But in the modernism, it was analytical. It was more of objective. And modernist thinking is about the search of abstract truth of life. Modernist thinkers believe that there is an abstract truth to everything and they searched for the abstract truth in life. But postmodernist thinkers believe that there is no universal truth to anything or abstract truth or anything that existed. Modernism attempts to construct a coherent worldview, whereas postmodernism attempts to remove the difference between high and low. There is no, everything is equal, there is no such thing as high and there is no such thing as low. During the modernist era, art and literature were considered as a unique creation of artists. In the postmodern era, they believe that it is only artists that are able to create any kind of unique creations. But in the postmodern era, with the onset of computers, media, advancements in technology, television and computers became dominant in the society. So there is a decline in the art, decline for the artists. So that is the key features of modernism and postmodernism. So you have to remember how modernism is similar to postmodernism and how it differs as well. So now let's look at some of the key features of postmodernism. Postmodernism, it has people less likely to follow rigid ideologies. The people belonging to the postmodern era didn't follow rigid ideologies like it existed in the previous period. So thereby there is fragmentation in social life. So there are no absolutes, that like we talked about, there is no absolute truth to anything, there is no universal truth to anything. That is one of the key feature of postmodernism. And then again we see that the culture and the structures are fragmented, thereby it became less predictable. Just because if there is a structure, only then you would predict something out of it. But if there is no structure, you cannot predict the features of it. So the lives of postmodern people became very less predictable, and the traditional labels and categories lost relevance. So there is a lot of impact on the people by the computers and the advancement in technology. There is so much of boom in technology, so people were influenced by it a lot. And there is this key concept of postmodernist theory, that is consumerism is all. We've talked about consumer capitalism. So consumerism, there is overconsumption. There is consumption at a very high rate, in such a high rate that it became risky. And then we see globalization has narrowed time and space. So these are all the key features of postmodernism. So please make sure you note down all the details of it. So you should remember how postmodernism is kind of similar to modernism, and also how it is different from modernism as well, and how postmodernism is so much so that it has lost hope on the world. It has lost hope, and it celebrates the fragmentation, and it celebrates the decenteredness of the society. So these are the key details that you have to remember about postmodernism as a literary theory. I hope you understood everything that we've discussed in this video. The class notes of this class would be available in my Telegram channel, and the link would be provided in the description box below. So make sure you check that out as well, and also subscribe to the channel. Thank you.